I knew something was wrong before I even turned off the engine. You ever get that feeling where your stomach drops for no reason, like your brain notices something before your eyes do? Yeah, that. I'd been gone 6 days, stuck in Phoenix for a supplier conference that should have lasted 3, and by the time I pulled my truck back into Ashton County, all I wanted was a shower, a beer, and silence. Instead, I came around the bend toward my property and almost drove straight into a line of orange construction barrels sitting where my driveway used to be. Not beside it, on top of it. I just sat there staring through the windshield like maybe I was too tired to process what I was seeing. My gravel drive, the same one my dad and I rebuilt after a flood back in '98, was gone under a fresh stretch of sidewalk and decorative concrete with little flower planters every 20 feet, like some fake small-town postcard. And my truck? Well, I couldn't even pull into my own yard anymore. I killed the engine and stepped out slow, hearing that new concrete crackle under my boots while a sprinkler system hissed nearby, like it was mocking me. There was a laminated notice zip-tied to my mailbox that read, "The Green Hollow Residential Association appreciates your patience during our Community Beautification Initiative." Patience. That word almost made me laugh. They'd buried my driveway while I was out of town and expected me to be patient. I called the number on the notice right there standing in the road, and after about 3 rings this woman answered with the kind of voice that sounded permanently moisturized. "Green Hollow office, this is Cynthia." I said, "Yeah, Cynthia. My name's Eli Mercer, and somebody just poured a damn sidewalk over my driveway." Silence for a second, then papers shuffling. "Oh, you're the property on Old Mill Road." Property, not home. Property. The board approved an extension project for neighborhood uniformity. I looked around at the pastel houses and identical little mailboxes lining the subdivision behind my land and said, "You approved tearing up private property?" She let out this little sigh like I was being difficult on purpose. "Mr. Mercer, your gravel entrance has been a point of complaint for years." "By who?" "Residents." "I'm not one of your residents." Another pause. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Well, the access lane falls under community usage now." Community usage. Funny thing about people drunk on a little power, they start saying words that sound official even when they mean absolutely nothing. See, my family had lived on that land long before Green Hollow existed. My grandfather bought those 5 acres in 1964 when the whole area was just pine trees and muddy county roads. Back then, nobody wanted the land because the creek flooded every spring and copperheads nested everywhere. But my grandfather loved it. Built the house himself with warped lumber and borrowed tools. Raised my dad there, then me after my parents split up. Years later, developers came in and built Green Hollow around us. All white fences and HOA newsletters, and people who called the cops if your trash can sat out too long. They tried getting us to join the HOA more than once. Offered community incentives. My dad used to laugh and toss their letters straight into the fireplace. "Nobody tells a Mercer what color he can paint his own porch," he'd say. They hated that. We were the one house that didn't match, didn't obey, didn't pretend to smile during neighborhood cookouts. And honestly, I think it drove them crazy. That night, I sat on my porch staring at the concrete covering what used to be my driveway, remembering being 12 years old beside my father mixing cement in a rusted wheelbarrow, while country music crackled from an old radio balanced on the truck hood. I remembered him pressing my hand into the wet edge of the driveway before it dried. My handprint was still under there somewhere now, buried beneath some HOA sidewalk project designed by people who probably thought hard work meant answering emails after dinner. Around midnight, I finally stood up, grabbed my truck keys, and drove into town. Because something about Cynthia's voice kept bothering me. Specifically how confident she sounded. Like she truly believed they owned that land. And confidence like that usually comes from paperwork. So the next morning, I walked into the Ashton County Records office the second they opened, and that's where things got real interesting. Now, I wish I could tell you I walked into that records office with some master revenge plan already forming in my head, but honestly, I was just angry and tired and trying not to do something stupid. The woman behind the counter was named Denise, probably late 60s, reading glasses hanging off a little beaded chain around her neck. She knew my grandfather. Small towns are like that. You carry family history whether you want to or not. She looked up when I walked in and said, "Eli Mercer, haven't seen you in here since your daddy passed." I nodded and slid the notice across the counter. Apparently my driveway belongs to the neighborhood now, She adjusted her glasses, read the paper, then gave me this slow little frown that told me something wasn't adding up. Green Hollow touching Mercer land? That doesn't sound smart. That sentence right there, that was the first crack in the whole thing. Denise pulled the county plats and old easement maps while I stood there drinking stale, vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. About 20 minutes in, she stopped flipping pages. Well, I'll be damned. She rotated the map toward me and tapped a faded strip running through the center of the subdivision. You see this? At first I didn't. Just looked like another county access road. Then I noticed the labels. The entire entrance road leading into Green Hollow wasn't county-owned. Wasn't public. It was a private easement tied to an old holding company. Hawthorne Agricultural Transit LLC. The name hit me instantly because I'd seen it before stamped on old tax folders in my grandfather's garage. That company's still active? I asked. Denise typed for a minute, then raised an eyebrow. Technically, yes. I felt my pulse start climbing. Who owns it? She turned the monitor toward me. And there it was. My grandfather's name, transferred to my father after probate, then quietly inherited by me after Dad died 6 years earlier. Nobody had closed the corporation because nobody even remembered it existed. But legally, it still did. Which meant the easement still belonged to us. Which meant every single family inside Green Hollow had been driving across Mercer-owned land for almost 20 years. I remember just leaning back in that plastic chair laughing under my breath because it was so absurd. All that time they'd treated us like squatters beside their precious neighborhood. Meanwhile, the only road leading into their subdivision technically belonged to my family. Denise looked at me over her glasses and said, "You're smiling in a way that concerns me." I told her, "I think the HOA just made a very expensive mistake." For the next week, I kept my mouth shut and handled everything quietly. That's the thing people underestimate about country folks. If we decide to make noise, you'll hear it coming. But if we decide to move in silence, you'll never notice until the trap snaps shut. I paid the overdue taxes on the holding company, which came out to less than $300 somehow, then filed the transfer paperwork to move the easement directly into my name. Whole thing took 4 business days. For days while Green Hollow residents walked their dogs across my buried driveway, probably congratulating themselves for improving property values. Meanwhile, I was sitting at my kitchen table every night reading land statutes and easement laws like a man studying for war. And the more I read, the angrier I got. Because what Cynthia and that board did wasn't just rude, it was intentional. They knew I wasn't part of the HOA. They knew they had no authority over my land. They just figured nobody would fight back. People like that count on exhaustion. They count on lawyers being expensive and regular folks giving up. But grief does strange things to a man. After my dad died, that property became the last piece of family I had left. Every fence post, every rust stain in the barn, every crooked floorboard carried memories. So no, I wasn't letting some retired control freaks erase part of it because my gravel driveway didn't match their newsletter aesthetic. Thursday evening, I finally got the updated deed in my hand. I remember sitting in my truck outside the courthouse staring at the paperwork while the sun went down over Main Street. One signature changed everything. I owned the road. Not metaphorically. Literally. Every car entering Green Hollow depended on land that belonged to me. And right then, sitting there with the windows down and courthouse bells echoing through town, I had an idea so petty and beautiful it almost made me emotional. Friday afternoon around 4:30, right before everyone started heading home from work, a construction crew rolled up to the subdivision entrance towing 2 massive steel gate panels behind a flatbed truck. I hired a company out of Bell County because I didn't want local contractors warning anybody. The foreman climbed out chewing sunflower seeds and asked, "You sure you want to do this today?" I looked at the line of shiny SUVs already heading toward the subdivision and said, "Oh, absolutely today." We poured concrete footings fast while traffic backed up behind us. Some residents assumed it was another HOA project at first. They smiled, waved. One woman even thanked me for helping improve the neighborhood. I almost admired the irony. By sunset, the gate was standing across the entrance road, black steel, 12 feet tall, heavy enough to stop a damn tank. Then I hung the sign right in the center. Private road. Access by owner permission only. Underneath that, smaller letters. Trespassers subject to removal. You could feel the mood change instantly. A guy in a Tesla jumped out yelling, "What the hell is this?" Another woman started recording me on her phone before she even understood what was happening. Within 20 minutes, cars were lined halfway down County Route 8. Horns blaring. People shouting. Somebody threatened to call the sheriff. I told them they probably should. Around 7, the HOA president finally arrived. Randall Bishop. Mid-60s, fake tan, white golf polo tucked into khaki shorts like he thought he was running for senator of a retirement village. He came flying down the road in a golf cart with Cynthia, beside him clutching a clipboard against her chest. Randall climbed out pointing at the gate. "Move this immediately." Calm as could be, I said, "Evening, Randall. Don't evening me. You cannot block public access." I pulled the folded deed from my back pocket and handed it over. He scanned the page once, then again slower. I watched the color drain out of his face in real time. That was my favorite part. Not the yelling, not the chaos. That exact moment when certainty leaves somebody's eyes. Cynthia grabbed the paper from him. "This can't be right." "County says it is," I replied. "Turns out y'all poured a sidewalk over my driveway without permission. So until that situation gets corrected, this road's closed." Randall stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were suddenly negotiating hostage terms. "You're creating a legal issue for hundreds of homeowners." "No," I said. "You created one when you touched my property." By then people were gathering around us, filming everything. One guy shouted, "I have groceries melting in my car." Another yelled, "My wife's inside with our baby." Randall tried one last angle. "Be reasonable." I actually laughed at that. "Reasonable? Your board buried my driveway while I was out of town." Cynthia crossed her arms and said, "That was approved through community vote." I looked her dead in the eye. Good thing this road wasn't. About 15 minutes later, sheriff deputies arrived. And let me tell you, watching Randall confidently march over to law enforcement only to slowly realize they weren't there to save him was deeply satisfying. Deputy Morales checked my paperwork, walked the easement line himself, then finally shrugged and said, "Road belongs to Mr. Mercer." Randall snapped. "So he can just hold an entire neighborhood hostage?" Morales looked at him and said, "Legally? Kinda seems that way." The screaming after that got loud. Real loud. But by then the gate locks had already been installed. And Green Hollow had just learned the hard way that the one neighbor they spent years trying to push around owned the ground beneath all of them. That first night after the gate went up felt less like a neighborhood dispute and more like the opening scene of a disaster movie. By 8 o'clock, there were people parked all along County Route 8 arguing in lawn chairs like tailgating fans at a football game. Half the subdivision was furious at me. The other half was furious at the HOA for getting them into the mess in the first place. And honestly, once people realized this whole thing started because the board secretly buried a man's driveway while he was out of town, public opinion shifted fast. Small towns love drama, but they love arrogance getting punished even more. I sat on my porch drinking sweet tea while headlights flickered through the trees, and my phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers. Most I ignored. One voicemail was a woman crying because she couldn't get her teenage son to work the next morning. Another guy threatened to sue me into poverty. Somebody else offered me $5,000 cash to open the gate just for the weekend. Around midnight, my old friend Wade called, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Eli, you turned Green Hollow into a gated community for real." I said, "You know what the funniest part is?" "What?" "They paid for the concrete that started all this." Even he went quiet after that. Because beneath the humor, everybody understood what this was really about. Respect. Boundaries. The kind of thing people stop caring about once they think rules only apply to other folks. Saturday morning, the HOA held an emergency board meeting at their clubhouse. You could hear the shouting from the parking lot. Residents demanding answers. Older couples panicking about property values. One guy apparently screamed that Randall Bishop should resign immediately. By noon, Cynthia called me, sounding nothing like the confident woman from earlier that week. Her voice had that tight, shaky politeness people use when panic starts leaking through professionalism. "Mr. Mercer, the board would like to discuss a temporary compromise." "Funny," I said. "I wanted to discuss compromise before y'all buried my driveway." Long silence. Then she asked, "What exactly do you want?" Truth is, I already knew. The night before, while everybody else was losing their minds, I sat at my kitchen table thinking about my father. About all those years he refused to let those people push him around. About how exhausted he looked near the end of his life after fighting county inspectors, developers, tax reassessments. death by 1,000 little battles. And I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about making sure nobody ever tried this again. So I told Cynthia, I want my driveway restored exactly the way it was before your project touched it. That can be arranged. I'm not done. Silence again. I want written acknowledgement that your HOA knowingly altered private property without consent. That one hurt. I could hear papers shuffling, muffled arguing in the background. Then Randall's voice suddenly cut through the phone. Absolutely not. I smiled. Then enjoy the gate. And I hung up. 20 minutes later, he called back personally. Funny how fast pride disappears when people can't get home. Randall sounded 10 years older than he had the night before. What else? I told him I wanted compensation for damages, legal fees, and a formal road maintenance agreement since the subdivision had spent 2 decades using private property without paying a dime. You expect us to pay you to use our own road? He snapped. Not your road, I said calmly. That misunderstanding is what caused this whole mess. By Sunday evening they folded. Completely. HOA attorneys contacted mine with paperwork drafts moving so fast, it honestly felt desperate. Turns out when 300 angry homeowners start threatening lawsuits against their own board, people suddenly become very motivated to settle. The final agreement was beautiful in its simplicity. Green Hollow paid to fully restore my driveway using the original gravel style I requested, not their decorative suburban nonsense. They paid damages. They covered legal expenses. And every year moving forward, the HOA would pay me a private easement maintenance fee for roadway access. $7,500 annually, adjusted every 5 years for inflation. Randall nearly choked reading that clause. But he signed it anyway. Every board member did. Because the alternative was explaining to residents why emergency vehicles, delivery trucks, school buses, and literally everyone else no longer had guaranteed access to the neighborhood. The gate stayed too. That was non-negotiable. I installed remote access openers for residents after the agreement finalized, each one coded and registered. Watching Green Hollow homeowners slowly roll up to a gate on land they once acted like they owned, then waiting for permission to enter. Man, there's probably a therapist somewhere who'd have concerns about how satisfying that felt to me. A few weeks later, the new driveway was finished. I stood there one evening at sunset staring at the fresh gravel crunching under my boots while cicadas buzzed in the trees. They'd even recreated the curved edge near the mailbox exactly how my dad built it years ago. And before the final layer dried, I pressed my hand into the corner again. Same spot, same handprint, just older now. Randall resigned from the HOA board about a month later. Cynthia transferred to another property association 2 counties over. Last I heard, Green Hollow residents still argue during meetings about whether the board should have fought me harder or apologized sooner. And honestly, I get both sides. Because if you strip away all the legal paperwork and neighborhood politics, this whole mess really came down to one question. How far should somebody be allowed to push you before you push back harder? Some folks in town think I overreacted. Others bring me beer every time they drive through that gate. Me? I think people get real comfortable crossing lines when there's never any consequence for doing it. And maybe that's the real reason this story spread all over Ashton County. It wasn't about property law. It wasn't about HOA drama. It was about watching a group of people finally realize that the quiet guy they ignored for years actually had the power to stop all of them cold. Even now, every once in a while, I'll sit on my porch late at night and hear the gate motor hum open down the road, then close again. And I won't lie to you, I still smile every single time. So tell me honestly down in the comments, did I take it too far? Or did the HOA deserve every second of what happened to them? And if somebody destroyed part of your family property without permission, what would you have done?